Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Beat the Challenges of 1099 and W-9 Compliance in 2025. My name is Ashley, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Today, we are covering navigating common challenges of 1099 compliance, managing contractors, reporting 1099 forms more accurately, and how to leverage Avalara. Before we dive into that, I just have a couple housekeeping items. A friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review that while I continue with some additional housekeeping. We are recording today's webinar, so if you want to listen to it again or share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. Slides can be resized by dragging the bottom corner, or you can download the PDF slide deck. The additional resources contains a lot of great related resources, including today's slide deck, so you can check those out. There are a couple ways to interact with our presenters and fellow attendees today. So first, if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Ask a Question box. We will answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A time at the end. You can also join our group chat at the bottom of your screen. It's the button with the little chat bubbles. Click that and the chat will pop up on your screen. We encourage you all to introduce yourself and make connections with fellow attendees. So drop in the chat where you're calling in from today. And then we also have reactions along that bottom toolbar, so you can let the presenters know what you're thinking as we go today. We are offering 1 CPE credit for today's presentation. For those looking to receive CPE credit, please note that we will ask you to respond to 3 of our 4 poll questions. The poll questions will pop up on your screen for a limited amount of time, so please make sure you're ready to answer when that appears. Please don't split or tile screens on your computer, as this can affect the placement of the poll question. We've also heard from past attendees that the poll questions might not display on mobile, so if you are calling in, please try and get to a desktop monitor. You must also attend the full duration of today's webinar. And then once you've met those requirements, your CPE certificate will be available to download in the Earn Certification box on your screen. Click the icon to access it, and it will open a new tab. If you don't have a chance to do that today, you will get the certificate in a post-event email. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide CPE credit to those who have technology issues that prevent them from qualifying. If you do experience an issue, please reach out as soon as possible using the Ask a Question box so we can document that issue. All right, let's meet today's presenters. First, we are joined by Gordon Walsh, 1099 W-9 Product Solution Consultant at Avalara. Gordon, can you take a moment to tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here. I'm Gordon Walsh, and I am the 1099 guy at Avalara. I have spent, after spending nearly a decade in education as a high school teacher and coach, I moved into the world of employee and non-employee tax, compliance, payroll, legal, everything related. And I've spent the last several years specifically targeting that non-employee, the vendor and contractor process management side of the house. So happy to be here and talk, share my time here with my right-hand lady, Giselle.
Great. Thanks, Gordon. We are also joined by Giselle Sarumba, 1099 W-9 sales leader at Avalara. Giselle, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, happy to. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for being here today. Gordon and I love talking about 2 things in this world. The first one is 1099 and W-9 compliance, and the second is fashion. If you love one or 2 of those things, welcome. We're super excited for you to be here. Yes, I am not the 1099 guy. That is Gordon's beloved title here at Avalara and externally as well. But I am a 1099 enthusiast, specifically the technology behind 1099s and just the ever-changing landscape of 1099 and W-9 compliance and all the fun things that the IRS likes to throw at us. It's a space I'm very comfortable.
Great. Thanks, Giselle. We're glad to have you both here.
Yes.
Before I hand it over, we do have our first CPE poll question, so that should be showing up on your screen now. And the first question is, how was your January when it came to 1099 compliance? Very bad, bad, good, very good are the options. So You can make your selection and hit submit. And as a reminder, you do need to answer 3 of the 4 poll questions if you would like CPE for today. So we'll give you a few moments to do that. All right, and then we have a packed agenda today, so we are not going to speak to the results. So I will pass it back over to Giselle to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks everyone for filling out that poll for us. So to help orient to where we are in the world of 1099, the timeline, the calendar. So most of you have been through January. Most of you made it through. Congrats. I know it's probably a tough one. And we are past February, the shortest month, and also felt like the shortest month. And we are here in March. And in March, we like to do 1042S and a few other random other forms as well in the month of March. But it gets you thinking, where are we in the calendar? What do we have left to do? Are we on reset mode for 2025 reporting? Where are we? Where are you? Feel free to drop that in the chat. How are you feeling after January season, and how ready are you for the upcoming? Feel free to let us know how you're feeling about it. Our agenda for today, we're going to share some recent learning. So we've been polling customers, we've been polling our partners, we've been polling our friends, people out there in the world. We want to share what we've learned from our own experiences and from survey results from others. We're going to dive into the W-9 and 1099 compliance, and also the sister forms here, the W-8 and 1042S. We'll talk about the IRS form compliance and all the things that it entails, and why the marathon of the year in tax still matters. We'll share with you a product walkthrough on how to collect an e-file with Avalara, and we'll also announce a few exciting things to come when it comes to our product. If we've got time at the end, we will definitely answer some questions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time that you have them in the Q&A, excuse me, and we can address those all the way at the end. Some of the exciting here, yes, they are API related. This is on the technology side. Gordon and I are very excited to share about that. So a few of our recent learnings, we had recently partnered with the Institute of Finance and Management. It's called IOFM. These are our partners who we run conferences with them, we sponsor their events, and we have gained a lot of learning from their membership. And so we wanted to poll and understand the reality of 1099 and W-9 compliance in today's modern times. There's a lot of old data out there, and we wanted to get fresh eyes on the current experience. There were 259 members of the IOFM community that were surveyed and helped us complete this. So we're sharing a few responses with you today and throughout. I'll just touch on them light front end and throughout the presentation. Feel free, you'll get the slides later today. So the first survey result we had is all about who at the company is even responsible for managing W-9 and 1099 compliance. And the results were obviously accounts payable. I think that's not necessarily a surprise, but we see a few others off to the side here, mostly financial related. I'd be really curious if we could double click into the other category, and if that happens to be you and other, let us know what department you're in and how you got the lucky task of being in charge of W-9 and 1099 compliance. Next up, the question was, during 1099 season, do you usually have to reallocate staff from other functions to handle 1099s? And the results didn't necessarily surprise us. Let's see. Though I think in past years we had this, shared services model or reallocating staff from other departments. Now people have gotten a good allocation of who needs to do what, how much time it takes to do any given task in the world of 1099s. But yes, and sometimes we're still significant in 2024. And then some of the most challenging parts of 1099 compliance. There's a little, maybe you want to play the game in your head of which one is the highest bar here. This one is pretty interesting because to us, we knew all of these were challenging. We knew all of it was a challenge in 1099s. But to hear from 490 respondents on this, validating payee information before filing to the 1099s with the IRS and collecting W-9s from vendors. So this is all vendor, contractor, W-9, your person, your recipients. This is all interactions with them on the front end and throughout as you're validating that information too. And then I think this is the final one. Do you use a third-party software or services to manage your 1099 compliance? So the majority said yes, but only for e-filing. And there were still a big chunk that didn't necessarily use third-party software or services to do this, which means they're doing it in-house. They are doing things rather manually, or some sort of aggregate of any and all of the above. One thing that I had noticed in January after being out of the space for a little bit and coming back into peak season with January and working with customers all over the United States, one thing that really stood out to me was how many people I spoke to that were left high and dry in January with no support from their service or vendor from last year, where a vendor, a service, a provider, someone who they had been working with in previous years just decided that they were going to exit the game of 1099s really abruptly and with not a lot of direction or notification, and certainly not enough time. Thankfully, we were able to help support many customers throughout season and get their filings in on time. But that's one that I had observed this year that was kind of a spike over the previous years, that though we are holding strong in the world of 1099s and excited to do so, there are a lot of other vendors and services that just are no longer interested in keeping up with 1099 compliance on behalf of their clients. Gordon, any observations from you this past January or throughout season?
Yeah, I think, and our survey results help to show that the 1099 it's kind of like I've got really bad heartburn. It hurts bad, and I want to deal with it as it's happening, and I don't have a lot of time to fix it. But the problem didn't come from this moment. It came from that huge greasy meal I ate hours ago and didn't prepare for that, right? Taking my medications and things ahead of time to soothe things over. So I it's really been an amazing kind of, as the world of compliance seems to get bigger, it's not so much just can I file a 1099 in January on time. It's all of the year-round process and all of the other legislation and other moving parts that really makes this complicated. So it was one of those things that, when the fires quickly started in January, it felt like a lot of the conversation really, we needed to put those fires out. But so much of what we were fixing were things that took place everywhere else in the year, and it was just going to create a better January. So I'm excited to kind of talk through this, give a high level kind of education, and discover, talk a little bit more about how Avalara helps in these things. So let's look at the W-9s and 1099, and then the corresponding international version, the W-8s and the 1042S, right? So, this is something that comes up everywhere. Everybody deals with it because the majority of, and when I say majority, I mean vast majority, between 90 and 100% of businesses in the United States have 1099s. And so this is something that everyone struggles with. And really the IRS gives us a short time to deal with it, right? You can't really get your total amounts for how much went on that needs to be reported on a 1099 until after December 31st, till those final payments are made. But the income needs to be postmarked, reported on the copy B to recipients that gets mailed out or electronically delivered by the 31st of January. So you only have a month to really put this together for most 1099s. And that can be really tricky to figure out at this point. Similarly, some companies are struggling, have the struggles of the 1042S, the international version of a 1099. And that's, because you contracted with people, foreign individuals or companies, foreign entities, people outside of the United States that do not have a U.S. tax identification number. And that has to be reported by March 15th. So a little bit more time, but it's also a lot longer paperwork. The W-8 series, much longer than the W-9, and the 1042S, a lot more boxes to fill out. Not to mention it's something that has to happen kind of ahead of time for sure, because you have to do some withholding when you're paying foreign individuals. And so it is something that we have to keep up with. Now, if you so far have been sitting here going, what are these things? We just want to get on the same terms. And hopefully most of you already know what a W-9 and a 1099 are, but we want to simplify this process and make sure we're all using the same terminology. So a W-9 is a form that we collect from a non-employee that we're going to use just to literally figure out who they are on paper. Their name, their DBA, their legal name, so it could be their first and last name if they're an individual, or it could be the company's name. What is their tax classification? So how are they filing? That is super important because that's what tells us whether we have to file a 1099 or not. It's going to have their address and their tax ID number, whether that's an EIN because they're a business, or their social security number, and a signature at the bottom. That's it. All it does is identify who they are, so we can take that, and that will completely transfer over all of that information onto our 1099. So a 1099 is the piece of paper, the document that we file with the IRS at year end to report the amount of money we paid or the amount of money involved in transacting with this non-employee throughout the year. It is due to be, well, it depends on the form, as we showed in the calendar early on. Certain forms have certain due dates, but the majority of them all say you need to have them postmarked or sent out to be delivered to the recipients by January 31st. So even though you may not have to file, still kind of means a January 31st deadline. And it is all the same info from the W-9 plus the total amount that you would have transacted with them. And I say transacted because it's easy to say a contractor, that's a 1099 NEC, and we'd fill in how much we paid them throughout the year, but maybe it's royalty payments, and so that goes on to miscellaneous. Maybe it's reporting rent. Maybe it's reporting the cancellation of debt on a loan through a 1099-C. Maybe it's the amount a marketplace seller sold, and that's a 1099-K, right? So there's all kinds of different transactions that could occur, but W-9 is what we need to collect when we onboard somebody and has all of their taxpayer information. 1099 is what we file with the IRS and send to the recipient come January to report that to the IRS so they can collect the taxes on it. Always remember, a 1099, the business does not pay the taxes. The recipient, the actual contractor or vendor, is responsible for the taxes to the IRS on all of those transactions. Okay? And these are tricky, right? It seems easy. I collect a W-9 each time I get somebody new, and then I take that information plus the total and I pay them or report it to the IRS. Whew. Well, Joselle and I would tell you that we speak to a huge number of our clients that don't, when we meet them, aren't collecting W-9s from everyone. Maybe they say, we try, but we don't always do a good job. Well, it's because somebody who doesn't understand the compliance of W-9 or 1099 had that job, right? Somebody in procurement or somebody in operations or sales. Maybe it's because, hey, they're a big giant corporation, and because corporations don't get issued 1099s, we just never ask them for one. Again, maybe check with the IRS. IRS and federal law say you're supposed to have a W-9 for every non-employee you pay, regardless of whether you're going to issue a 1099 or not, before you pay them. So keep that in mind of collecting one of these before you ever make payment. It puts you in the best, safest position. And keep in mind that the fines can go all over the place, from $60 up to $630 per missing W-9, and that is without fees, fines, and late penalties. Okay. The other problem is, well, what happens when I collect a W-9, but what if the information on the W-9 isn't correct? That's probably the number one issue we come up with or talk to our clients about, that companies we talk to will tell us, here's my biggest issue. And I think that IOFM survey we took, that's one of the biggest, it was the top challenge, right? Is getting the correct information, because a recipient may not know how to fill out a W-9. I take that W-9, use that to file the 1099, and then I get the rejection from the IRS. It's a catch-22. So if we don't have the right name, the right tax ID number, the right address to mail to, if we don't have that info correctly, then the IRS comes back to us and will charge us those taxes. And it is a standardized backup withholding rate of 24%. So if that info isn't right and we file, we may have to deal with that 24% plus late penalties and other assessments. Okay. And then storing the W-9s themselves can create all kinds of mistakes, right? this has got personal information on it, especially those that are individuals that file as a sole proprietor individual that have a social security number on it. That can become very, very personal information, which is always subject to potential data breaches or hackers, people trying to take that sensitive information. So keeping these in a secure, encrypted, smart location can be really important, really, really important. Okay. Now let's flip over to the other side of it. What is a W-8? What is a 1042-S? Same exact thing. Now just add international. So when you need to collect the information for a non-employee that you're going to pay that does not have a United States tax identification number, you're going to issue a W-8. Now the type of W-8 you issue is going to depend. We're going to get into that in a second. But you're going to send them a W-8, and that's important because in these circumstances, like a 1099, the IRS isn't collecting taxes afterwards. They're collecting the taxes up front or from you because you are responsible for doing withholding based on the country they're from, right? If there's a treaty, what's called a U.S. tax treaty or not, there are certain standardized rates of tax collection based on the country and the agreements we have with that country. So you're going to want to make sure you have this so that before you start paying, you're withholding 24%, 30%, 20%, 15%, whatever that is, so that you don't get stuck paying the bill or chasing this payment down from a contractor from another country way after the fact. Okay. Now, at the end of the year, instead of filing a 1099, we use that information to fill out a 1042-S, and we file the 1042-S with the U.S. government in order to prove that information. So W-8 1042-S equal to W-9 1099 just for our foreign individuals. Okay. Ashley, we're going to pass it back to you for another poll question.
Great, thanks. The second CPE poll question should be on your screen now. If it is not, just try a quick refresh and that should get the poll question back up on your screen. So the second CPE question is, how many W-8s do you collect relative to W-9s? And we have several options for you. So pick the one that applies to you and then hit submit. And just as a reminder, to earn CPE credit, you need to answer 3 of the 4 poll questions and attend at least 50 minutes of today's presentation. So I'll give you a moment to answer that. Okay, and like we mentioned earlier, we do have a packed agenda, so we're not going to spend time speaking to the poll results. So I will move us on and hand it back over.
Awesome. So this is back to the IOFM membership survey. Which of the following W series forms you typically collect? So we know W-9s are huge, like 90%, right? That's very, very common. We have W-2s, W-4s getting a nice shout out here. We also have other, which I don't know what other would be, but might be a fun game to guess which one you think of the 5 different W-8 series, 5 flavors you think is the highest. We saw the W-8 Ben and the W-8 Ben E as being the majority, and I guess that makes sense. And we'll go through each of them. But if there are any surprises there, feel free to mention that in the chat or Q&A as well. So the W-8s do come in 5 flavors, and I'm actually going to build all of these out so you can see them side by side. The first one we have is the W-8 Ben and the W-8 Ben E. These are for foreign individuals versus foreign entities, and those were the 2 highest on the survey. These are the most common. You're going to see these all the time. The W-8 ECI, these are for foreign individuals and foreign entities. Now, Gordon mentioned the treaties. Gordon mentioned some other interesting things in the world of W-8s. We also have the W-8 EXP for foreign entities with the tax exempt status, and the W-8 IMY. These are for the foreign intermediaries. Now, I do wonder how many on the call today are experiencing the latter 3, because we just don't see them very often. We don't see them much, but I will say, and Gordon, you'd probably agree with me here, that we'll probably see a lot more of these in the coming years as globalization just continues to take off.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID definitely changed the way the world does business. And one of those major ways was the individualization of talent. We see way more companies moving abroad. Instead of employing somebody in-house, they go abroad and contract out work. And that may take them to a much larger scale of foreign contractors and potential foreign use cases. So definitely going to see this grow and grow.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, for better or for worse, globalization is here, and we have the tax compliance to support it. So the 5 flavors of W-8s, here's probably the biggest distinction and thing to keep in mind with the W-8s versus W-9. W-8s are all super long. So if you're familiar with the W-9, you're like, oh, it's a friendly face. It's the W-9. I'm very familiar with these. I do these all the time. I do them as a personal, as a vendor or contractor personally. So if you've done these before, if you're very familiar with the W-9, great. The W-8s, they're just, each one is much longer than the W-9. So prepare yourself on that one. And also very important to note, so we know W-9s do not expire. Technically, they don't expire. Now, the IRS comes out with new versions of it from time to time. I think the most recent version is March 2024. That doesn't necessarily mean any old ones are expired. The W-8s expire every 3 years. So important to gather those every 3 years from your foreign individuals and entities. I think that was an example of, let me just look at when this was. October 2021 was the last time the W-8 Ben was updated. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. The Ben is the Ben E is my least favorite. That one is more pages than I've got fingers and toes, and that's just too high to count. So, but let's talk a little bit about some of the realities of IRS form compliance. Why this is again a little more challenging than just get a W-9, issue a 1099. Bada bing, bada boom, I'm done. There's a lot of other moving pieces involved, right? The first, IRS deadlines. Depending on your form, depending on what you're doing, it's different timelines. So 1099 NEC, probably the most popular. We're gonna, just for those of us who are very living in the world of 1099, we're gonna exclude 1099B from any of our conversation. It's in its own little world for brokerage, transactional data. And so, yeah, there's like 5 billion of those filed, but outside of that, let's remove those. My little disclaimer up front. The 1099 NEC being one of the most popular 1099s filed for work done, and January 31st is the paper filing, e-filing, and recipient due date, right? But if we look at a 1099 miscellaneous, well, e-file and recipient copies are the 31st, but if you're going to paper file, and bear in mind, you can only paper file with the IRS if you have 10 or less information returns. That's going to include a lot of forms, but the popular ones are going to be your W-2s and your 1099s. You'd have to have a pretty small company for this to work. Those are due by February 28th, okay? Whereas the 1042S has a March 15th deadline of these different things. So, there are all kinds of deadlines, and bear in mind, they're rigid. There is not exceptions unless you pre-file for exceptions or extensions. It doesn't matter what your story is. You need to have it documented. You need to have it done on time. How about states? States can be quite the pain, right? So even though we have a federal system, every state has their own ability to change their own rules. So let's talk about a few examples. North Carolina. North Carolina says if you have any withholdings on a 1099, you must also file those in addition to a Form NC3. And depending on the form type, the deadlines vary. Only matters if you've got North Carolina tax withholding on your 1099, not something that comes up often. But if you don't know those rules, that can be tricky. Delaware says, hey, if you're filing a 1099 NEC, that needs to be done by the 31st. But if you have a miscellaneous or a 1099R, well, those don't need to be here till March 31st. Also tricky because it might be a part of combined filing, but if the state's timelines require January 31st, well, even though that's true for the IRS more than likely will not file that combined filing back to the state in time. So you may still be required, like in Delaware's case, to still file with the state because otherwise they won't get the combined filing status information until way too late for them to do anything with it. New Jersey is another one where if you had taxes withholding payments on there, it's adjusted to February 17th. Whereas if you don't have any withholdings, it's still the 31st. It's hard to keep up. Every single year, we at Avalara re-up on this. We get in touch the departments of revenue. We do the research. We make sure we know all the rules and have the interpretations in our system to automate this. But man, there's a lot. There's a lot to keep up with, right? This is another major one that we hear all the time. Tax classification. This is box 3 of the W-9, where if you're familiar, you know it's the most obnoxious box ever. They have to check, that recipient checks a little box of what is their tax classification. So are they an individual sole proprietor, a C Corp, an S Corp, a partnership, a trust or an estate, or an LLC, or potentially an other, something like a 501c3 status. And if they're an LLC, then they have the little line, they have to write S, C, or P for what type of tax class they are. Whew. This is a problem because the directions are difficult to understand if you don't know already. And our single member LLCs, also known as disregarded entities, think they're an LLC when from a tax status standpoint, they're still a sole proprietor. And so this can cause all kinds of issues. But if you think back on it, the only document there is that establishes that one business would give to another to establish whether they should be 1099'd or not and what their tax classification is the W-9. So if you don't collect one of these from every single business, customer, vendor, supplier, freelancer, whatever you call them, seller, ambassador, I can keep going. I feel like I'm going to keep thinking of new ones. I'm going to stop. Then you would never know. And this is the only way to do it, right? So make sure that you're doing that for each one of these pieces. How about IRS? We talked about state, but the IRS itself has challenges because they keep changing their requirements, right? Remember, if you've been in this game long enough, then you remember a world where the 1099 NEC didn't exist. Everything was reported on the 1099 miscellaneous. Weren't those just simpler days? Weren't they just simpler times, Giselle? Where
the good old days, yeah.
One form to rule them all.
Yes, miscellaneous took over. Anytime you made payments, people, you're like, I'm just gonna put it on a miscellaneous, and it was fine. But then the NEC came out, and it subdivided out that non-employee compensation for work done, and so we got that, and that caused some major changes. We still here in 2025 have conversations regularly with people who don't necessarily understand the difference between NEC and miscellaneous, right? So still kind of wreaking havoc. Again, back in tax year 23, so what would have been a year ago for reporting purposes, is when that introduction of 10 or more electronic information returns meant electronic filing. So out of the blue, very, very late in the year, all of a sudden it was rolled out, and all these companies that are so used to just filing, printing on paper, filing in a big envelope, sending that in with their 1096 on top to the IRS, all of a sudden had to find a means in which to electronically file because they weren't allowed to paper file. Oh man, 1099K, all of you marketplaces and third-party administrators out there, the 1099K has been a roller coaster. It has been set, and it had been set at a threshold of $20,000 and 200 transactions. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the IRS said, well, we're going to get rid of transactions and bring the threshold down to $600, which would possibly be billions of new 1099s that weren't filed last year that would have to be filed this year. Ultimately, they delayed that action. Last year then was the first year they rolled out a new setup where last year the threshold was down to $5,000. Transactions are out the door, one transaction or hundreds, doesn't matter. This upcoming year here for the 2025 filing season that will happen in January of this upcoming year, it'll be a $2,500 threshold. And then the year after that for filing season 26, it will be down to $600. So again, tons of changes. And now here we are for 2025, the IRS released a brand new 1099. It's been 5 years. They gotta keep throwing out new ones. The 1099 DA for the reporting of digital asset transactions for exchanges and brokerages. That does have implications today. It's not reported until January, but if you're not tracking all of the transaction details, then that could be a lot of work come end of year to get those ready to go and moving. Last couple things here, and this has to do with the DA. Again,
just remember that there's a lot of this, the basis to report on, what was the digital asset bought at, what was it sold at, what was the net gain, the net loss. All of these things have to be collected to fill in. And so, it's something to really, really start thinking about and tracking now. Recipients themselves can create a challenge, right? If they moved or they reincorporated or they have bad handwriting, we can't read what they put on their W-9. Maybe they just never send us a W-9, right? They can create some issues for us. So bear in mind that one of the things that we hear a lot is the pain in the butt that is mailing these recipient copies in January and the cost associated. You can send them electronically. You can email them or e-deliver them. But bear in mind, you must gain consent to electronically do that. That's the IRS rules. They do have information in publication 1179. I know that's not on here, but publication 1179 that talks about the rules you must follow in order to electronically gain consent for electronic filing or find a tool that has that ready to go. And as we've always said, right, you don't have to issue 1099s to those that are incorporated. C Corps, S Corps, LLCs, tax S Corps do not need to receive a 1099 outside of medical or legal settlement type situations. And then if we can, remediating and removing the human error, right? If they give us bad TIN numbers or they don't give us a state ID or their legal names are misspelled, right? Anything we can do to attempt to stop rejected filings, because that's going to cause you headache way down the road. It's not in January that you're going to feel this pain. It's going to be in April or May or October when you get your CP 2100A notice saying, here are all the ones we couldn't match, and here's the fines associated. Same thing related to a 1042S. Just again, bear in mind, there's a lot of boxes. So making sure that you have the tools in place and keeping track of and removing as many interaction points where a human being could potentially mistype, copy and paste, do something that could create more error, the better off you are. And then I keep saying it's almost there. This is I think our last one, our last challenge to talk about. But the states, again, not only do the states all change their rules, but we also have the combined federal state filing program. Shorthand, it's called CFS. And this is where if a state wants to, they could buy into or participate in a program where when you file your 1099 to the IRS, the IRS will automatically give the information to the state for their filing purposes. Super helpful, but not all states participate. Rhode Island is the newest state. They just joined this year. But again, some states, because the information doesn't get from the IRS to them on a from the federal to the state level very quickly, there are plenty of states that still require you, even though they are part of CFS, to participate and do more than that. And they don't necessarily do a great job of telling us when they join. Rhode Island, for instance, the world found out that Rhode Island did this through a bunch of press releases and things that were not from Rhode Island. It was not until the very end of December, beginning of January, that Rhode Island's Department of Revenue website finally said that they had joined. Otherwise, the only documentation was through the IRS, and you didn't know what you were doing from a Rhode Island standpoint. So again, having some type of tool. Oh, Rhode Island. I had a nickel for every time that happened. So we're going to sum it up right here in one slide. All of the different steps that it takes to be compliant, right? From requesting a W-9 from your vendor, your supplier, whatever you call them, taking that and making sure, one, you can read it. Is it on the most updated form, right? If you're collecting one today, is it on the March 2024 revision of a W-9? If it's not valid. You got to go get a different one. Can we read their handwriting? Do they have the right boxes filled in? It's becoming more and more prevalent that vendors like to overfill the form, right? So they put in a social security number and an EIN. That's not going to work. We need one or the other, not both. Once you've verified the information is accurate, all boxes are filled in that need to be, now we should be going to the IRS website creating an account and validating their TIN, making sure that their tax ID number and legal name match the IRS database. And if they don't, well, then we got to start over. If we have any of these errors, we got to go back, start over, re-request, and get that process rolling. Now, once we have a TIN matched correct version with all the right boxes, we need to store that in a secure location. Again, making sure that it's somewhere that we don't put ourselves in trouble. And then we need to go through the audits. Does the W-9 meet the requirements to create a 1099? Again, taking out corporations in most cases. If it's one of those anomaly cases, we need to make sure that we know we do still need to create a 1099. Then we're going to go through and research all the 50 states. We need to make sure that we know what the state's rules are for the states we need to file in. We're going to take all of our information from our W-9, transcribe it over to our 1099s, and then add the information from our ERP or AP system on those numbers. And again, that's another threshold check. Does it meet the thresholds for, like we said, a 1099K? Did they get paid $5,000 or more? For a 1099 NEC, did they get $600 or more? For an interest payment, $10 more. A royalty payment on a miscellaneous, $10 or more. But rent and other income payments on a 1099 miscellaneous is still $600, right? So knowing all those thresholds, once we've done all that, now we can file. But again, file with the IRS and each individual state. Still not done. We need to make sure we get a copy of that 1099 to each recipient, set either postmarked or e-delivered by January 31st. And we better hope we did it all right, because if we filed any that don't match up correctly to the IRS system, we are going to get what's called B notices, or your CP 2100 notice. And that's going to tell you that you need to track down the correct W-9, or you're going to pay that 24% backup tax. It's a lot. It seemed so easy when we started, and really there's so many steps along the way that can make this more complex. All right, Ashley, back to you for another poll question.
All right, we have our third CPE poll question that should be on your screen now. The third question is, what % of vendors submit W-9s that contain errors of some kind? So we have some options there. You can make your guess and hit submit. Just as a reminder, this is the third of 4 CPE poll questions, so we'll give you a second to get your submission in. And the next slide has the answer, so we won't leave you hanging on the answer to this. Okay, thanks for answering that question. I will pass it back over.
Awesome. So our survey said, again, this comes back to the survey we conducted in December, the 251 responses, what percentage of vendors submit W-9s that contain errors of some kind? Our survey said 16%. Now, 16%, not terrible if you're only doing 10 or 15 of these. That's not too bad. It's still probably 1 or 2 more than you want it to be. But if you're doing 100, that's 16. You do the math. You take out, pick 16 random 1099s, add up the total, and then do 24% on that. That's how much you'd be paying the U.S. government for those mistakes, right? So that can be pretty intense. That can be pretty intense.
I'd rather have new shoes. I'd rather have new shoes.
I like shoes. Yeah, I'm a big shoe guy. I like that. I think that's a much better use. Yes. Yes. So we look at this as a marathon. This is about a marathon, right? To quote one of my famous or favorite, most eccentric ex-Navy SEALs, I know there are so many to choose from, but David Goggins, former Navy SEAL, now motivational speaker, ultra marathoner, ultra fitness guy. He likes to do everything that's over the top. He said, running a marathon is a war. You don't just show up and run one without paying your debts beforehand. You can pay your dues by following a running program that acclimates you to 26.2 miles. And so that it's saying you don't show up to a marathon without training for it. That's 26.2 miles you have to run in one go. That it could be miserable, so painful, right? But if you have a process, you run a few miles each day, you hydrate, you stretch, you take care of your body, year round, when you get to the marathon, you're prepped, you're ready, and it's much easier, much quicker. And that's exactly what we preach here, is that if you had pain in January, it wasn't January that caused the problem. It was the things we did or didn't do year round. And if you just adjust that process, man, does it get easier, right? So really just looking at this and understanding that the big time of year is January. That's never going to go away. But if you're doing things like getting a W-9 at the point of onboarding before you ever make payment, running TIN matches through the government or through the IRS before you ever pay them to make sure you're not getting yourself in trouble there. Checking to make sure W-8s haven't expired and getting new ones before that. Checking for updates, having a partner that updates you. E-filing on time, having this stuff done so that you're not rushed against the clock. Carrying your data over, just pre-setting up. I mean, we are big advocates even to our customers to say, hey, in November, why don't you try going to our website and logging in so you make sure you don't play the I forgot my password game when you're like, I only set aside 2 hours to do this and I don't know my password and I can't figure it out, right? Why don't you try doing those things ahead of time so that you can keep up and keep track? So I know based on time, I won't go into too much wild depth, but I'm going to share my screen and run you through a quick explanation, a quick demonstration of what Avalara can do and the power of the Avalara W-9 and 1099 system is, because having the right tools can make this easier. Okay, so in our system, we help to collect W-9s and file 1099s, where I can have all of my companies and all of the different people from the AP or procurement department all have their own accounts, where I simply have to log into the system and able to either in bulk or at one at a time, send out a request using just a vendor name and an email, clicking send, that sends out a basic email. And I need to, my last ones were not there. That has a link that allows the recipient to open up our secure website with our Form W-9 alternate, where we ask them to fill it out so that we can eliminate certain errors, right? Things like when they get down to it, if they only enter 8 digits in their tax ID number, we'll block them from submitting. Or if they try to give us a social security number and an EIN, we won't let them submit. They have to fill in the right boxes in the right format in order for us to accept it. We will gather a live signature. We will gather, as we talked about before, that IRS mandated consent to electronically deliver a 1099. And when they click sign and continue, it's going to do a live TIN match with the IRS and feed the results back to them. So if it doesn't match, they're able to come back into this form, revise the information, and resubmit up to 3 times to get it live TIN matched with the IRS, so that it doesn't come back to you without them having put in that energy. So now you've got a common formatted W-9 in a easy to follow dashboard where we can see who we sent requests to, who's filled it out. We'll automate telling you whether you even need to issue a 1099 based on their tax classification, who signed it, the date of last update. You can manually or automatically send updates to ask for new ones or to fix the rejections. You can download the PDFs of the W-9, so you've always got those in audit for audit's sake as well. Even better yet than that, if you've got some developers on staff, we also have the tools in which you can embed this. So if you have your own website where you can send a contractor or vendor, you can just embed buttons for the W-9 and the W-8 series, where when they click the recipient clicks the button, it embeds our form right here into the page, doesn't redirect, doesn't go to a third-party site. It actually doesn't say Avalara anywhere, but still gives them all of the same tools and processing power and feeds all of the results back to you in the same place. So we have a lot of options for collection. The best part is that at year end, all I have to do is click transfer to 1099, and this will take the already TIN matched, TIN validated information and push it directly onto the 1099s. So now if I click in here on my 1099 engine, I will see all of the recipients have come over. And if I click in on one, I will see all of their tax recipient information has been filled in. All that's missing is how much did we pay them, which I can use either integrations that we've got built with other systems, a CSV upload, or we have ready to use open-ended APIs that you can submit this information directly to us if you have some developer help. But that will inform, let me have to get back. Inform our form summaries will still help you catch errors in audits. We'll give you the ability to select the date you want to e-file, the date you want email delivery to go out. You can still have Avalara mail any remaining forms that don't gain consent for e-delivery. We always include an address verification through the United States Postal Service and one more TIN match as a safety net at year end to make sure that you are able to catch any changes or reincorporations that your vendors may have had that they didn't tell you about. And then we make it very, very easy. We give you easy to follow dashboards afterwards that tells you, when it was sent or accepted by the IRS, anything from an email acceptance standpoint. And we even track mail to the point of delivery. We will take care of all of those states, an unsung hero in the background of our system. We said you have to keep up with all the states, not if you're a partner with Avalara. We know all of those details. We automate it for you and automatically will make the filings. We'll give you the easy to follow address verification, TIN match results. And bear in mind, at the end of the day, you are able to make your corrections either before you file or if you don't realize it until after. You're able to do corrections free of charge in our system. Very easy to use. So complete end-to-end system meant to help you both with the collection of data and validation of data via the W-9s and W-8s, but also filing at year end. One more poll question.
Okay, it's time for our final poll question. So this should be on your screen. If you are interested in follow-up, you can select yes. So if you want to hear anything more about what Gordon just shared, you can click yes, and we'll have someone follow up with you after the webinar. So I will pass it back over.
We have a lot of exciting things to come in the world of Avalara 1099 and W-9. And if you responded yes to that final poll question, we will share that with you live once it happens, once it comes out. But one of the survey results that we did get, so the question was, is software that allows different applications to communicate with each other, these are APIs, important to you for the purpose of automatically getting payee information into your 1099 platform from the W-9s? And our results from the survey showed that yes, it is important to me. Over half said yes, it is important to me. And a few said it was not, a big chunk said not relevant to my situation. Of course, we'd have to double click to understand a little bit more about that. But if about half of our respondents, 259, said yes, I imagine a lot of you on this call would say yes to that as well. Well, good news, coming soon, we will have APIs that integrate with your ERP, your accounting systems, your e-commerce, your marketplace platforms. We have so many on deck ready to be launched for APIs to connect to our Avalara tool, so that there's no more uploads, downloads, crossing things over. It's just a seamless process to help automate from start to finish from your ERP through our 1099 and W-9 processing tool off to the IRS. A few benefits. The time savings, of course, uploading, downloading, moving data around, automation, reducing mistakes, flagging those for you. Having one singular workflow in a programmatic system is way better than having multiple throughout. If you see all of these little details on here, this eliminates any steps that would require a user to go in and have to move data around or update things. And then there is no need to engage with the IRS. No TCC you have to deal with, no uploading and doing the files on the Fire or the Iris or however you're getting it over to the IRS. None of that. It's quite exciting. you want to learn more about this, if you did respond yes to the final poll question, yes, we will be in touch, but you can also ask us questions. Here are our emails, Gordon and myself. You can also learn more about our products at avalara.com. We've got a whole product page for you, but we'd love to share more with what we're doing over here at Avalara for the 1099 and W-9 and get your feedback as well. We're constantly developing this product, and we do that by listening to the customers who are using it and customers who are interested in using it and what struggles you're dealing with and the challenges. As you'd seen throughout the survey, our product is built around optimizing the performance of a tool for 1099 and W-9 and all the other forms that go with it. So we'd love to hear your feedback and love to help create a product that works for you and your teams.
Great. Thank you, Giselle and Gordon, for that presentation and the demo. We just have a couple minutes left for Q&A. So as a reminder, attendees, you can drop your questions in the Ask a Question box. So let's get into a couple of the questions. First question is, what is the penalty for filing 1099s late? I am assuming it would be better to file late with accurate info than on time with inaccurate info.
That's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. Fees and fines typically start at $60 per occurrence. If you just Google IRS information return penalties, they have like a standardized chart of how things work based on when you file. The later it is, the worse off you are. But the interesting thing is that there's, and again, not advice, but the popular belief in the world of 1099 is that it is better to file on time with inaccurate information than or without like a tax ID number or something, because you may get away without a fee at all, right? If you file a 1099 with just a name and a number and not having a tax ID number, the worst that would happen is, or the best case scenario is that you're going to get a CP 2100 notice that says, hey, this is wrong, but you could correct it and it won't cost you anything. Whereas if you file late, you will definitely get a late fee. So it depends on the situation, but there are ways in which if you file on time, even with bad information, you may be able to get out of it without a fee. Whereas anytime you file late, you're going to have a fee.
Okay. Perfect. And then we had a couple questions regarding LLC. I'll kind of boil them down. Basically, they're asking, do LLC partnerships, do LLC companies need a 1099?
That's the tricky one. LLC itself does not help answer the question for you. I hear that from people all the time. Like, well, it's an LLC, so they don't need one. Remember that the C at the end of LLC stands for company, not corporation. So it depends. An LLC is not really a taxable entity in itself. There are certain entity types within that. So you can choose to be an LLC taxed as a sole proprietor, taxed as a partnership, taxed as a C Corp, although I've never seen that in all of my years, LLCs taxed as a C Corp, or LLC taxed as an S Corp. If it is an LLC taxed as an individual sole proprietor or as a partnership, they would still need a 1099. So you need to look, if it's an LLC, you need to look even deeper into box 3 and look at the further notes to see, is it taxed as a C Corp, S Corp? Then no, we don't necessarily have to issue one. If it's a partnership or individual, then we should be issuing a 1099.
Okay, great. And then we saw a lot of comments excited about the TIN matching. Would you want to share any more details on that? We had quite a few people excited about that or interested in it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away is just remember that, my first question to most people is, do you TIN match? And if they say no, then I get on a soapbox and I tell them why it's important, right? Just matching information. It's your best precautionary tool. If they say yes, then my second question is when. Because even if you collect a W-9 and you're following the rules, well, if the W-9 has bad tax ID information on it, then the saying is that a W-9 with mismatched tax ID is just as a W-9 at all. There's no difference. You're still going to get in trouble with the IRS when you file a 1099 information on it. So before you've ever made payment and you are liable for potential taxes, TIN matching before that is the most important piece and time to do it. And that's what our software is able to do with the W-9 tool, because then you know If it doesn't match, well, I might be liable still for 24% backup tax. If it does TIN match, you can feel pretty confident that when you go and issue a 1099 with that data on it, it's going to be accepted by the IRS. And now you've gotten past that portion of it. So it's the single most valuable tool the IRS ever gave to the world of 1099 to make their lives easier and to make your life more compliant.
Great. Thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour. So just want to thank our presenters again for getting through all this information and sharing their wealth of knowledge on the topic. I just have a couple items to close out with. So if you qualified for CPE credit, you can download your certificate now in the CPE certificate engagement tool. Your certificate will also be available to download later today. In a post-event email that you'll receive, you'll get a link back to this console. You can view the on-demand recording, get the slide deck, look at the additional resources, and also download your certificate there. So thank you all again for joining today's webinar, and this concludes our event.